Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hope That Helps podcast. I am Camille.
And I'm Ramsey. And today we're going to be talking about foster care and travel. Kind of a fun one.
Yes.
When you listen to this, it's going to be spring break week. And we will be on a little trip of our own.
Yes.
Camille, you want to tell them where we're going?
Yep, going to New Orleans.
Ooh.
So basically because of Ramsey though, because you get to go on an extended trip.
Yes, we're going on a cruise that's going out of New Orleans. And so we invited the Grimes to come with us for the weekend before we board on our cruise. They have some other fun things planned for spring break as well with their work. They're taking some kids out, right?
Yep, we get to take a spring break trip for our 4th and 5th graders every year. Shout out to the Arkansas Dream Center if you want to donate.
Yeah,
Shameless plug. But yeah, definitely it's all donor based, and we take a trip and get to go see like an NBA game, go to the aquarium.
Cool.
Super fun. So yeah, we'll be in Dallas the second half. Unfortunately, May doesn't get to come with us on that. So we're trying to do a little family trip before we go on that trip.
Yeah, and I'm so excited we get to do that together. It's going to be so fun. But with that comes a lot of questions that people have about kids that are experiencing foster care, if they can travel, what they can do, what do you do about vacations, what if you have to go somewhere without them and they're not able to come. So we're going to answer all your questions about that today. Like I said, should be a pretty fun one, should be, something that's pretty interesting to you guys, I hope. And so we'll jump right in, starting with what do you do if you want to travel with your kids that are in your home and experiencing foster care? Like, what does that process look like? And can everybody travel?
No. We were just talking about that. Well, generally speaking, it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, sometimes you need certain permissions. Sometimes it's a very easy process. For us so far, it's been a very easy process. But it really depends on the child's situation.
Yeah, and so like for us, it also was something that we were able to do pretty easily, but it is case-by-case basis. There may be some legal reasons why kids cannot leave the state, or maybe they're still working really hard on their case plan and they have certain visits they need to attend or court dates they need to attend. And then also taking into consideration, probably most importantly, if you do have family members that are working really hard on a case, you would want to get their parental permission to make sure that if you're taking their kid out of the state or on an overnight trip, that they're okay with that. I think that comes with having really good relationships with bio family that we've, talked about quite a bit and are going to talk about more on the podcast. And so, yeah, I think every situation's a little bit differently. There might be reasons why maybe a bio parent wouldn't want their children to travel. Maybe they're not comfortable with it, or that the state doesn't want a child to travel. And those are things that we just, can't really control and we welcome. If it's for the safety of the child, obviously everything we want to do is child forward. So as much as we would love to take them, also open to, not being able to. But that hasn't been our story so far. We've been able to. So when you talk to a caseworker and you ask permission, let's say they say yes, what's kind of the next steps that you have to do? What kind of information do you need to give if you're going to go on a trip?
So there is some paperwork that you need to fill out and make sure that it's all legal, I guess you could say. But for us, it's been very simple. We just have to give some basic information of like where we're going, who we're going to be with, what cars are going to be ridden in, things like that.
Yeah.
But it's
and if you're flying, like your
if
flight
we're flying,
numbers and stuff like that.
And that's something we still have not done. We've not flown with May just yet. So you have a lot more experience as far as that goes. But yeah, it's a pretty easy process overall so far.
And those are the things you would have to do if you were going out of state.
Right.
So if you were doing an overnight trip within the state of Arkansas, I think that would be okay to not have permission. Maybe if you're staying overnight somewhere, you would probably need to let them know. But let's say you live in a border town, or like for us, we're 2 hours from Memphis. There was a time where we went to the Memphis Zoo for a day and came back. That's just like a regular average commute. So we didn't have to fill out paperwork to go to the zoo and then come home like we would if we were going and staying somewhere out of state or staying outside of our home. So we're talking mostly about travel out of state. What does the state of Arkansas have to say about international travel?
That's a no, unfortunately. That
Thumbs
is a bummer. So if you are traveling, that would be something you would have to do not with your child. So
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in a minute, but
and I think with everything, like, it's just important to keep your child into consideration. What trips maybe can they go on? Can you opt for a day trip to somewhere really cool in your state versus going out of state? You know, if they are going to be able to go out of state, you know, where's something they haven't seen, or where's somewhere where their bio family, if they are involved, might be comfortable with, or, you know, kind of how can you accommodate them in your travel plans? And we'll talk about in a second how sometimes you can't accommodate for that. And so you have to go, or you have something to do. And that's obviously not an area where you can do that. How can you accommodate for them if they're not coming?
right.
And so, yeah, traveling's pretty fun. We've been a lot of places. I'm excited to go on more. You guys have been on a trip.
Yes. So we've been on a couple trips over the holidays. I have family in Memphis. And so we actually went on a day trip for, I guess it was over Thanksgiving or something like that. And then also for Christmas. For us, we did let our caseworker know about the day trip, and she did request for us to just like give some general information. I think that's a good rule of thumb, just to check.
Yeah.
But I think it's true. Like, if you're not staying the night, it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, we did let our caseworker know just some general information. And yeah, then we did spend the night with my sister and just let our caseworker know some very basic information, and, you know, did some paperwork, and that's really all there is to it. So, but again, that's specifically for our situation. It's just very simple.
Yeah. For us too, my parents live out of state. I don't know if a lot of our listeners know that, but my family's not here. And so they're about 3 hours away, and they're just over the state line, which is sometimes a little bit frustrating because I'm like, they're almost here, but they're not here. And so every single time we would go to spend a weekend with my parents, or like go there over the summer, I would have to get permission every single time, which did seem kind of like frustrating, because I was like, by our 20th time, I'm like, you know where we're going, you know where we're staying, you know, but it's necessary. Obviously, the state of Arkansas is like the legal guardian of these people. And so like it is important for them to make sure they know exactly where these kids are at all times and what they're doing. So when I say I'm frustrated, I don't mean that it's not necessary. It's obviously necessary. But yeah, we traveled there a lot in our first year. We traveled quite a bit.
You really did. I feel like you would tell me all the places you've been so far, and I'm like, my gosh, Ramsey.
Yeah, we did.
Awesome.
We did California for our first out-of-state trip. That wasn't my parents' house.
Right.
Yep, we went to California for spring break our first year with MJ. We went to Disneyland. It was really fun. I took both of my kids to Dallas prior to our adoption. We went to Great Wolf Lodge, went and did stuff like that. So it's a really great like bonding tool. It's a fun experience. Obviously, not everybody can have the time off to travel like that or go state to state. But I try to find a lot of things that were within reach or driving distance to do. We've been to Oklahoma. We've been to Tennessee. We've been to Alabama. We spent, one of my best friends lives in Alabama. We spent 4th of July with her, a very country 4th of July experience.
Bama.
Yeah, it was very Bama. And then since then, we've traveled as well. So like, yeah, we've been a lot of places. But again, trying to think about accommodations. It's also different traveling with kids than it is traveling with yourself. So there's a lot of things I learned about traveling with kids in general. Packing, flying.
Yep.
Oof, that's a lot of fun.
A lot of respect for those of you that do that on the regular. My gosh.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot. I think it was a whole new experience. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, this seems like a lot of fun when you plan it.
Right.
When you're doing it, you're like, oof, it's a learning experience as you go along. We drove to Disney World. So,
I know when you did that trip, I was like, okay.
A whole 14-hour drive. And it actually went really well.
You broke it up, though.
Yeah, we did.
You did break it up and stay.
But man.
Yeah.
Wow. It was
a long drive.
Yeah, so traveling with kids is always fun. But there's just extra precautions you would take, extra information you would give. You know, you do have somebody that you need to stay in contact with and make sure you're available to them, no matter how far or close you are. Even if I'm at, you know, my parents' house, I always ask for permission, always text our caseworker, make sure people know where we're at. If anything were to happen, like an emergency or something like that, they would definitely need to know where you were at, what you were doing, etc. So it's really important to just do that. But I think it's a misconception that foster kids can't travel. And it just depends.
Yeah, I think on the note of traveling, with your kids, something really important to just think about is how transitions can be really hard for kids in foster care. And I think that that's something to consider whenever you are going on trips. Doesn't mean it can't be fun or can't be a great experience. I think it's important to have your kids live normal lives and experience new things. But there also is an aspect that transitions can be really hard. And for us, whenever we were first traveling, it was when we were going to visit a lot of family over the holidays. So that was a very interesting time. It was still fun, and Maymay was a great sport. I mean, she was awesome. However, there were times where it's emotional, and again, specifically because we were with family, that brought up a lot of feelings for her. And I think, too, maybe the kid could potentially be nervous about it. You know, you're going with not
essentially strangers.
Yeah, strangers. I was like, maybe at that point you're not strangers. You know, hopefully you are spending some time getting to know them before you're going to travel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Use wisdom. But at the same time, like, even if it's been a few months and you've gotten to know each other, it's still you're going somewhere with new people. And so that can be scary. I think that's something to think about and consider when you go on these trips, to not be surprised if feelings come up, and to just be prepared. And I think having conversations with your kid ahead of time too, of like, hey, this is a new situation. Like, this is what we're going to be doing. Like, I don't know, kind of lay it out. I think that's a really good practice, is to lay out new experiences for your kids.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Camille. And especially in thinking about little kids, like, yes, there's big emotions for teenagers, and those will just play in a different way. I think for little kids, and what I've experienced is that they may have a fear of, like, where are we going? Are we coming back?
Right.
If you're traveling without them, are you coming back? Like, what's happening with so much transition, especially leaving your home and packing up, that can be a very traumatic experience. And so that can be triggering, and that can be hard. And so, I think definitely explaining beforehand, hey, we're going to go on a vacation, and being out of their routine. Like, I know for my little kids, like, being out of their routine sometimes, like, sets them off a little bit. They have, like, higher emotions. Like, things are just, like, a little bit more unknown. Prepare them and let them know what to expect. Make sure they want to go too.
Right.
There are some trips that you don't have to take, like a vacation. If they don't want to leave home, you know, and especially in those early months or early days, like, that's really important to have those conversations and say, hey, are you comfortable if we take a vacation, if you want to go here? You know, I know you guys have had those type of conversations too. Like, you have to think about hotel rooms and accommodations, and are you comfortable here? Would you be comfortable sleeping in a room by yourself in an unknown place? Like, things that I guess probably most parents think about, but foster parents think about even more so, just from a trauma-informed standpoint. It's a really good point.
Well, because, I mean, with biological children, you've hopefully built that up since birth, that trust and stuff. So a child that's been in your home is not necessarily going to question that, versus a child who's new to your home. They don't know you, and maybe their experiences have always been, when you're packing up and leaving, it's not a good situation. Like, that could be very triggering. And so I think it's important to address.
Yeah, and this is getting, like, heavy, but even things like hotel rooms and things that have happened in people's, like, past experiences, like, that stuff can be really hard and heavy. Those might be places that don't feel safe to them. And so just definitely use a lot of caution, wisdom, like you said, and make sure that you're going places where they feel comfortable with people that they feel comfortable with too. You know, like, maybe don't invite a whole bunch of strangers on your vacation the first month, or, you know, whatever it might be. How can you accommodate them the best, I think, is always what we're talking about on this podcast is, you know, how can we be more trauma informed? How can we do things in a way that make these kids feel comfortable?
Yeah, I think overall it's just a balance. You have to, you know, continue to live your life and enjoy your life, but you also have to consider the children that are in your home and what their needs are, and just use wisdom in what you do, what you choose to do. And I think there's going to be times where you travel without them. So, Ramsey, what does that look like whenever you go on a trip without your kids?
Yeah, we've traveled several times over the course of our family relationships and our different phases of our family. My kids were in foster care with me for over 2 years. They're adopted now, so that looks a little bit different in terms of me leaving or traveling on trips by myself. I would say emotionally at the beginning, I was very careful, kind of like what you're saying, and advising is like, hey, maybe take some time, get to know these kiddos, make sure they're comfortable, make sure that they feel like the accommodations are adequate and they're not triggering before you leave them. That transition can be really, really hard. My daughter actually has struggled a lot with me going out of town or leaving. Not so much anymore. Again, that's something that grows, like a comfort grows there, security grows the longer you parent somebody. And so it's a little bit different now than it was. But definitely in the beginning, if I would leave for a number of hours or an overnight, that was like the sky was falling out. She was so upset. And I understand why. I mean, she didn't have that sense of security, or she also had a lot of fear, and still does sometimes, of whether or not I would be safe or I would come back. And she would have a lot of anxiety about me going places without them. And it was really sad. Like, it broke my heart as a mom. I hated that. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And yeah, I think that, again, taking into consideration those emotions, those feelings, how can we best, help support those? And then sometimes it's also part of, yes, live your life, but sometimes it's okay to be like, hey, I'm not going to be able to travel in this season because we've got to build these relationships, build the security, and make sure that my kids are okay before I just take off and do whatever I feel like doing. I would love to travel way more. But as a parent, some of those selfish things that you used to do all the time by yourself, you don't really get to do the same anymore. And
I think even more so in this situation, and that sucks to say, but I think that becoming a foster parent, you take on that responsibility of,
absolutely,
I think, giving up even more. And not to say you don't sacrifice a lot just being a parent, but I think that there's extra things you have to take into consideration.
Yep. And so, there's just times when that wasn't an option for me. It wasn't what I wanted to do for my family. There are times when it was, and I felt like it was a good thing to do. So if you were going through this process, you would do something similar. You contact their caseworker, but then you would have to find people to, obviously watch your kiddos for however long you're gone. How does that work, Camille? Who can watch them? What does that look like if you were traveling without them? Maybe you had an emergency, or maybe you're just going on a vacation and they're not able to come. What would happen with them?
If your child's going to stay overnight, they need to be with someone that has had like a background check, that is basically on your list of trusted people. There's also options for respite care, which means that people go through a similar licensing process, but it's not as in-depth. So they're basically licensed for a shorter period of time, not necessarily to long-term bring children into their home. Luckily for me, I have a friend who is licensed, so that's very helpful. And same with Ramsey, she has other people too that she's been able to lean on that are fully licensed, and so that's super helpful. Because a lot of times, I think you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable leaving your kids, even though they've been through a licensing process and they have background checks. That's great. But it is a little, nerve-wracking for you and your child to go stay with someone who's a stranger, most likely. Yeah. So not to say that's just something you shouldn't utilize, because I think it's really helpful. But I think potentially that would be like a last resort.
Yeah, so for us, the first scenario Camille explained is what's called a foster family support system in Arkansas. I don't know if other states have this type of system, but that's basically a friend or a family member that has gone through a little bit of a process, so like a background check, a driving record, this and that, and they could stay in your home. So that would be like a preferred option, because obviously this is your friends, your family, the people that you've chosen. Right. They can only stay up to 72 hours. So for a longer term trip, that may not be your best option. But if you're going overnight or for a weekend, that would be, probably a preferred option. Second one, like you said, respite care. That's going to be someone maybe but maybe also somebody you don't know. Like the state could help you find someone, a respite care. Yeah. worker to help you, that would be in their home. And if they are a stranger, like you said, sending them to a stranger's home, like straight out, having to pack them up. Again, those are things that could be triggering. They could be confusing. They might just feel straight up uncomfortable. And so for us, that has been a last minute. And then, yeah, if you have friends and family that are fully licensed, that's obviously like a huge benefit. But again, for me, my family is not here.
Right.
So they're not even able, because they don't live in the state of Arkansas, they're not even able to be a friends and family support system. They're not able to license to be able to help me. They're not able to do respite care. And so I've had to lean on a lot of people over the years. But yeah, I wasn't necessarily super comfortable with respite. That's not to shame anybody who uses respite. There's so many foster parents that utilize that. And there are so many great people that are respite care
I think
workers.
that's a great resource if that's what you need to do.
100%.
It's just, again, for us, I think that's more of a last resort because we have friends and family.
Yeah. It's not the most preferred option.
Right.
But yeah, they can help you. And obviously they're a little bit more informed on like trauma-informed childcare and stuff like that. And so, their home is safe, that. So there are some protections in it that are really good. And if you don't have people near you, I would definitely say reach out, especially if you do need a little bit of a break, a little bit of respite, if you will. That's why it's called respite care. Reach out and see if there's anybody that could help you. And there may be people around you who do respite care, and you might just not be aware. So there are a couple people in my licensing class that did it that I would have felt comfortable with. Yeah, it just wasn't my necessarily preferred option. But yeah, that doesn't mean that you can't go and do what you need to do.
I think something too to consider is if you do have friends and family that want to be part of that support system, if they are going to essentially be, or I don't know if you'd say license, but be able to have your children in their home for 72 hours, they have to go through a certain process of checking their home, similar to what you had to go through, just not as in depth. So we do have friends and family that have opted out of the fuller walkthrough of their home. Instead, they have just offered to come stay at our home. And so they've had a background check, but they don't have to do the full process. So that's also an option too. If you have a friend that's well, maybe they don't feel comfortable doing the full in-depth walkthrough. They can just stay at your house.
And that works for transportation and other short-term, things and stays and long-term babysitting and stuff like that. So that's a very helpful thing to have. Again, I don't know what that looks like in other states, but that's our experience. If you have questions about that though, you can let us know and maybe we can do some research for you on, how to help you get that time that everybody needs. I think you guys as a couple need respite sometimes. You need to get away. You need to relax and clock out for a minute. And me too. I'm a single parent. I don't think anybody should feel guilty about traveling, but I do think you should feel, like you're doing it in a way that's respecting your kids, respecting your kids' families. If you're in a situation where, you have family still involved very heavily, definitely respect everybody's feelings, I think, is the main heart of this episode.
And I think too, just like what we were saying before, having conversations ahead of time, laying things out, how it's going to play out is super important, especially, not just when you travel with your kids, but also when you go away from your kids. For us, we're trying to do that. We actually are planning a trip for our anniversary in a few months. And so we told May now, she was not really happy about it. She's like, y'all are leaving without me, and she was upset for a second, but I think she understands why we're going away. And we're telling her months in advance, this is not something we're doing right away. We are going on that work trip, but that's just a couple nights.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just important to have those conversations, be transparent, be open about it, consider your kids' feelings and let them know what's going on.
And one thing we haven't talked about is if you have biological children or other children in your home, and maybe some can travel and some cannot. I think there's extra special consideration there of how a child might feel if they have to be left at home and everybody else gets to go. How is that going to make them feel? How is that going to make your kiddos feel? Are you guys going to be having as much fun as a family? You know, if you have somebody missing, is there maybe something else you could do as a family? And I'm not telling you not to go. This isn't advice, but you know, those are things to think about as well. If you do have some kiddos that maybe can and some kiddos that maybe can't, what different accommodations can you make there too, so they don't feel left out? You know, if all the other kids in your family are going and you're stuck at home, that can definitely feel very like you're on the outside, and that stinks. Obviously, for May going on an anniversary trip isn't as like earth shattering. No. But if you were going on a trip and you had other children or something like that, that might be something where she feels a little bit more left out.
Yeah, for our trip that we're going on for our anniversary, we're trying to go to New York City. I love New York City. It's where I have family. And Zach and I love walking around and doing all the things. It's, you know, it can be chaotic, but it's super fun to us. And that's something I really wanted to introduce May to, but I did have to kind of take a step back and think like that actually might be a really stressful trip. It might bring on a lot of anxiety because you're walking around everywhere, you're experiencing new things, like you're seeing new things literally at every turn. And so if you're not used to that, like that could be very uncomfortable. And so that is something we had to consider too, is just like, is this a good place to bring our child, even though we love it? You know, maybe down the road, that's somewhere we can go together. But I think it was just important to have that conversation with her ahead of time and make those decisions ahead of time. And I'm sure she loves to hear that. She's probably like, no, I want to come with y'all. But, you know, it's just a decision we have to make. And I think it's good to, like we've been saying, it's good to take some time and take a step back and rejoin later.
Yeah, and for me, going from a single person who loves to travel to a mom of two, I would pick places sometimes that I'm like, I want to go here. And then I realized this is not the most kid-friendly vacation. Not that I'm going anywhere sketchy per se.
No,
but just something more adult that I think is fun. And they're like, I literally could care less to go to this museum somewhere. And I'm like, oh, dang it. That's like my idea of fun. And for small children, their idea of fun is like the beach, a cruise, you know, something more kid exciting. We went to Great Wolf Lodge. Is that my necessarily ideal vacation? No.
But it's still fun.
It's fun. I had a blast.
Yeah.
But I think too, sometimes that transition for us is like, oh, I can't just like hop on a plane for a weekend and go to Vegas with friends or go to the beach or go to LA or New York. Like those are the things I would love to do.
Yeah.
And I will do those things again. And I've done those things since being a parent, but not without time and careful planning and consideration, and also doing stuff with my family because I enjoy my family.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's so fun. And if you have a kid who's experiencing foster care in your home, that doesn't mean that you can't have those same, you know, feelings and considerations and be excited to travel with them as an extension of your family. Like you should want to, you should enjoy it. They should be able to experience things like everybody else experiences them. And so don't be afraid of being excited to take them somewhere or to do something with them. It can be a bonding experience. It can be a lot of fun. And so it's something that you should prioritize if you want to and if your kids want to. And if, you know, you have all the right permissions in place, it could be such an awesome thing. It can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I think we just wanted to talk about this because it's important to continue to live your life and do fun things. Do fun things with your kids. Do fun things as a family. You know, there are things you have to take into consideration. There's steps you have to take in order to take trips, but doesn't mean you can't do it. And so we hope this episode was helpful and gave you some information maybe you didn't know, and just encourages you to travel because it's a lot of fun to do with your family.
Absolutely. Well, hope that helps. As always, thank you for listening to the podcast. We're so glad you're here. If you want to keep up with us through the week, you can follow us on social media on everything at Hope That Helps Pod. That's TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We also have a new feature on Spotify called Listener Support. So if you want to give us a little something to keep the podcast going, if you like what you're hearing, you can make a donation over there. And we're going to be running ads soon. So if you have business, a nonprofit, a passion that you want to advertise, go ahead and hit us up. You can email us at hopethathelps@gmail.com.
And if you would, go leave us a 5-star review. That just helps us push the podcast out to more people so that more people can hear this content. And as always, thank you to our production team, Eric Pardo and Zach Grimes. Y'all are awesome.
Bye.
Bye.